Alright. Hello and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. I'm going to turn my game volume down a little bit here. I'm really enjoying the music here in Lintrev in Swanfleet. I was just noticing that as Little Redhead was playing along through here. It's like, oh, I haven't heard enough of that. Anyway, hello and welcome. So, last time on Plugin Along, we answered some questions from chat. We increased our plugin version number, which is an important thing to remember to do. And we worked through a bug with deed cascading. And just as a reminder, a thing that I really like about Deed Tracker is that if you complete a deed, we'll go ahead and load it up here. If you complete a deed, it'll automatically mark as completed any prerequisites. So if you complete Explorer of Breland, haha, excellent, we have an error that cropped up at some point. But ideally, if you complete Explorer of Breland, it completes everything below it. And we can see those check marks did happen, but we also see some error messages happening during that. And this is excellent. I also saw, I think, this error message when I was playing around over on Crick Hollow this last week. So, let's see. So that was last week. Today we're gonna start by kind of reviewing what's changed since then, and then fix this bug, and then add to Deed Tracker the idea of the difference between horses and ponies. And that's important because for the collections deed, if you come over to the race and social part of the class race epic tab, there is a section for collection deeds. And collections, because hobbits and dwarves ride ponies, and humans and Bjornings and elves ride horses, any deed that refers to a horse or a pony is duplicated internally in the game. So there's 2 Rider of Rohan, there's 2 Rider of the Free Peoples, there's 2 The Steeds of Gondor, and so on. And there's a few others that are not under the collections. And so to support importing from the LOTRO Plugin Compendium, we want to have those duplicated in here, but we only want to show one of them to each character, the correct one as is. So, that's where we're at. And then, if possible, we're going to look at some code that Egg Arthur sent me from the Alerts, I think, plugin, about how to maybe better handle HUD toggling on and off, the thing that happens when you press F12. That's a thing that can cause problems for plugins because there is the escape problem, and that is to say, when you have turned the HUD on, if you press escape, if you turn the HUD off, if you press escape, it brings the HUD back, but in a way that plugins don't necessarily understand. And so it'd be nice if we could be properly in sync with the HUD. Okay, so as always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions on all of that. But in the meantime, let's dig into this error message, because that's an exciting error message. Let's see. Okay, so we see very helpfully the line of code where we have an error. Specifically, it's called plugin functions, line 661. So let's pull that open in our source source file here. We're using Visual Studio Code, and just to double check, we're going to go into our source control and confirm that our working directory is clean. The only change in there is a debug flag, so it's going to be very easy to undo anything we accidentally do by mistake. And this is just a really good habit to get into. When you get started, try if you can to have a clean working directory. Make it so much easier to verify that what you did during this batch of coding is what you meant to do. You didn't do anything extra, and you aren't going to have one massive snapshot or commit that just covers a bunch of different things and makes it very difficult to untangle the pieces later. Okay, so we have this bug that I saw that was plugin functions 657. This is 661. That might be very well the same. Sometimes if you know, the line numbers will change as you add code. So let's come on in and see what we have. So what was it? I saw 657. Okay. And I saw attempt to index local deed and nil value. Well, there's no deed here, so it might very well be down here, 661. Okay, so is category deed? Well, that's not great. Now, we should not be getting a nil value, but we can deal with that. We don't actually need to care. If the value is nil, it was not a category. So if deed equals nil, then return false end. So we shouldn't ever get a, we should probably not be getting into that in the first place. And it would be nice to know what's going on. So before we actually finish this, let's take a moment to say, hey, how did we get here? And we can do that by dumping to our debug channel. And it's all going to the standard chat channel. The debug function is just a wrapper around turbine.shell.writeline that codes it red, so it's very noticeable when it comes out. And what we want is the, so we want to say nil d is category nil, and then we want to go ahead and have the turbine.engine. It's going to be something like get stack trace. Have to double check on that. And we can do that with the API. So LOTRO, API documentation, turbine, engine, get call stack. Haha, I want to call it get stack trace. I mistyped that pretty much every time. So get call stack. Oh, we need our then up here. Perfect. And so what this is going to do is we're not going to error out, but we are going to understand where we are calling from. Okay, let's go ahead and reload the plugin. Well, it should probably clear off that completed information. Okay, got some more errors. All right, so we're going to unload. We're going to reload. Aaron Bart said, sorry, I missed the intro. What about ponies and horses? So, there are internally to LOTRO duplicated deeds for if you have deeds related to you mounted a horse or you mounted a pony. So the Steeds of Gondor, there's two different ones internally in LOTRO. And when we're importing deed completion from LOTRO, the LOTRO companion, that distinction matters. And so we just only want to show one of these two, either for the big peoples or the small peoples, depending on what your character's race is. Okay, so first we're going to come fix this bug. So, excellent. We got different errors, 692. Oh, verbose logging is not turned on. That's going to make it harder. Okay, so when we start over on that one. Okay, so we try to do, this is not happening, this is happening on, well, we have multiple deeds. What is going on, or problems? What is going on here? So we're going to come into 692 and say, get deed skip info on current deed, attempt to index local current deed. That's not good either. So same thing. Let's go ahead and say if current deed equals nil, then, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and debug, and we're going to spit out this information. We know current deed is nil. We can actually just put in character. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Turbine.engine.get whatever it was, call stack. Aaron Bard, you're welcome for the recap. No problem. It helps to get the problem solidified in my head anyway. Okay, so uncheck that. Let's go ahead and reload this. Okay, so what are we seeing? Is category no, stack traceback. Okay. This is in get deed skip info. Yep. In function set deed complete. Okay, let's find that. Set deed complete. Well, that's actually coming from main window. Okay. Main window, why are you misbehaving? So we have set deed complete, character current deed. Now, I guess the question is current deed a good thing to pass here? It might be. It might be. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead and debug calling set deed complete with a deed. And we're going to call use a special function called dump, which is just going to nicely format out the different table members so we can kind of poke at it. So let's bring this back. And let's go ahead and click the old forest. Okay. So numerous things here. We see calling set deed completed with deed blah. So we have a bunch of stuff. Awesome. But we can see in get deed skip info, we're passing a nil. So it looks like we maybe are referring to the wrong variable in that. All right, awesome. Let's get in there. Set deed complete. Aaron Bard asks, you mentioned a completionist helper plugin. Maybe. I definitely referenced the LOTRO Companion, which is a third-party program that can get the status of your character. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure my vault and wardrobe and shared storage have been loaded. So the LOTRO Companion, the way that works is it can go ahead and scan your character and give you information on that. So we'll go ahead and let it run for a moment. Great, it's all done. So why is this useful? Well, I can come over to Treebeard, Affodil, that's me. I could go to quests. I could say, hey, if we're in Swanfleet, please show me all the uncompleted quests. Oh, not that many. Make sure they're not hidden. Looks like I have started a brief respite. Indeed, I have started a brief respite, so that's excellent. But these are the only ones that have not been finished yet. And so if I'm a completionist type person, that gives me a really fast view into what do I need to do to completely finish Swanfleet as far as quests are concerned. And I could do the same thing with deeds, come into deeds, go ahead and find the category for Swanfleet. Actually, it'll be Cardalon and Swanfleet, won't it? Swanfleet and Cardalon. Never mind. Haha. Swanfleet and Cardalon. We can go ahead and say only the uncompleted ones. And don't show me any hidden deeds. Cool, okay. Now, there's a lot of delving ones that end up in there as well. That's going to take a while. But assuming you eliminate delvings, we can see there's a bunch of ones that are underway. Some of them haven't even been started. The Trophy Hunter of Swanfleet and Cardalon. You just have to find those things in the wild. So that's going to be a while. So, yeah, from a completionist standpoint, I find this very helpful to just get a really fast snapshot of how are we doing in this area. Okay. So, not sure if that answers your question, Aaron Bard, but it's a cool toy. So, in set deed complete, we have a deed, and when we call that function, so we have get deed skip info. What are we passing? Possible deed. And possible deed is here. Okay, so we're good on main window. Main window is passing the right thing. I feel good about that. I'm gonna get rid of that debug statement because it's verbose. Okay, so we're in get deed skip info. Awesome. And we know we're getting called with nil. And that came from get deed skip info came from set deed complete. So there we go. We're in here, and we want this get deed skip info. So any other uses here? Nope. Okay. So, and that is line 270. Great. So the call stack is definitely telling us what we need to know here. So why is this thing wrong? And so what we want to do is if possible deed equals nil, then we want to know about it. Let's go ahead and debug. Got nil deed for ijk equals, and you know what, let's do a string format. It'll be a little bit nicer. String format. String concatenation starts getting a little rough. For ijk equals that, and then we can go ahead and add an I, j, and deed index. Okay. So let's go ahead and reload this and try to get a sense of what is going on here. Because just checking off these deeds worked last time I checked. All right, so got a nil deed for ijk equals, well, that's fascinating. Well, I'm a little confused at that, and so to make life a little bit easier, I am going to go back to concatenation. All right, let's take a look at that and see what's really breaking here. Just keep on checking these off. All right, got a nil for ijk. Oh, that was interesting. 6136. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but let's double check that that's true. So what are we doing here? The get deed function should be taking an ijk. Oh, I see. I think this function broke over the week. All right. So what we should be using is the deed. Where is it? Yeah, okay, that's been broken, or is broken. Neat. No, okay. Phew. It's just got the squiggly thing because of the namespace issue. So deedlog page tab content. So what we're looking for is 6136. Phew. Okay, so we can go ahead and collapse these down. 6 should be Areador. Great. 1 is Breland, and 36 is, not surprisingly, the wrong one. Interesting. Are my indices all broken? They could be. I auto-generated a file that could very well be hurting us. What do we have here? The Ruins of Breland. I was just trying to lower the Cardinal prints. All right, let's go check our lookups then. In DData, lore of the Cardinal prints. Fascinating. That should be 6. Well, what is going on here? I think the cascade completion logic might not be as complete as I thought. So let's add some debug here. Debug. Cascading. Cascade. Checking. IJK. And deed index is arcade. I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck those because we're, running short of things to explore in the parodowns. All right, so if we click that, okay, we can see the cascading is going wild here. That is not the logic we should be doing for cascading. Cascading should be stopping sooner than that. Okay, so if deed's cool, okay. We are, if the temp deed equals the deed tier, then the correct level is false. Oh, I see. I see. So, in other programming languages, C#, C++, whatever, for loops have an easy way to say I'm done with a break statement. And to my knowledge, Lua does not have these. But I believe we can simulate it with a while loop. And that would be useful because right now we're doing a lot of extra work. We're going through the rest of what's on the tab, and that feels unnecessary. So as soon as we detect the temp tier equals deed tier, we really just want to be done. And so a way to do that is to wrap this for loop in a while loop, and that while loop has the flag. So while correct level do, and then this would all get indented properly. Okay, so we have that. Now we don't actually need to check the correct level here because we have that early out. And if that's the case, we're going to come on in and reload the plugin. And then what happens here? Well, it doesn't work. So, off-the-cuff logic changes, not always awesome. What did we see do? Okay, so we incremented through, and anything that was one lower level than it, we marked off as correct, which is, wrong, but interestingly wrong. Okay, so that was not great. Why didn't that work? Okay, let's throw the correct level thing back in there just to make sure that wasn't the problem. I don't think it could be. Okay, we're still cascading through that IJK. That's fascinating. The skipped deed thing is interesting to me. Is that the correct logic? If we're not skipping the deed, well, that's how we get the deed tier. But make sure I understand what's going on here. We just want to know what's going on with this temp deed tier and tier. So we're just going to go ahead and do, as always, another debug statement to get a sense of the state of this. Now, in the real world where we have debuggers, this is the kind of thing where you just step into it with a debugger and kind of check the state of the program, make sure it conforms to your worldview. But since we don't have that, temp deed tier and deed tier. Debug statements are a great second alternative, where you just say, you know, can show me that the state of the world conforms to what I think it is. Okay, Old Forest. So crack level equals false. Oh. Yeah, that while loop is wrong. It has to replace the for loop. It can't contain the for loop. So, deed index equals k plus 1. So we need a local deed index equals that. Okay. In my haste, I forgot that when you want to use a while loop to support early out of a for loop, you have to write the for loop yourself in terms of a while loop. So we have to do our own increment, we have to do our own bounds check, but that should provide at least what I was going for. So we're going to go ahead and deselect those, come back in, reload this plugin, and then hopefully see a little bit faster stopping of the logic. Hooray! We did not go through everything. That being said, we still have identified a problem, because if you do something where the next one is a category, I would still expect to see an issue. But maybe not. There we go. So Enmity of the Goblins, because the next thing didn't have the same tier, we're still running aground of some issues. So let's check into that. We have set deed complete, get deed skip info, calling is category on something. And that's going to be a problem. So we want that deed skip info. But if this is a category, what do we need? If it is a category, we're going to skip things. So we need skip deed to be populated for the get deed skip info. And Bard has confirmed that the difference between a pony and a horse is about 4 inches. I don't know if that's true also in-game, but I do think there are some people who really cared a lot about horses involved with the horses in Lord of the Rings Online. From what I've heard. From what little I've heard. But I do not know enough about horses or ponies to really know for sure. Alright, so get deed skip info obviously needs to understand about nil deeds. But why is the deed nil? The deed is nil because when we get into get deed, this is returning something out of deed data. And deed data only has information for deeds. So what I think we need is in the get deed skip info, line 701, we need to go ahead and sort this. So if the deed is nil, then we need to return something sensible. So, hide deed. This does things. This had logic based off of. There's stuff in here that cares. Yeah, this deed skip info is in need of a rewrite, because for categories that contain legendary server only deeds, you want them to be marked as legendary server also in some fashion. And so what we want to come look at is the categories file and see, did I anticipate this? Deed categories. All right. Okay, legendary equals true. Awesome. So why are we ever using get deed when it could be get deed or category, I guess? All right. So we need a to-do item. Probably after that one. Find uses of get deed, IJK. Make sure they shouldn't be, well, really, check if they should be get deed or category. Because that's going to be the key out of this, I think, is if there is a deed, cool. Otherwise, it was a category, in which case we want to go ahead and get that information about the categories. So, going back to line 701 here, nope, going back to line 276 here, this get deed skip info is being called based off of this deed, but I think we need to call get deed or category. And if we do that, I think that's going to solve some more problems for us. Let's give that a shot. Okay, so first of all, just unchecking that didn't throw an error, so I think we're on the right track here. Okay, another thing I'm seeing is for deed cascading, we are only checking to see if it's the same level. We didn't check to see if it's one up. And I think that's probably an oversight, because if we go above us, we're also done with the cascading of prerequisites. So if we come back in here and take a look at this, if it's equal to, I think if we change that to less than or equal to, we're going to see, for instance, this cascading getting simplified. Let's come back in and take a look at that. Why is that happening, though? So we didn't stop until we got to 54. There's a snoring cat over on the other table. Excellent. Got 5 to 41. One of our cats has a very heavy snore. I'd say she's a good 10 feet away from me, and she's just going at it. All right, 5. Yep. I know. chase those rodents or something. 5 to 41. Let's go check into this. 41 ID equals this. That lets us go to the D data, which lets us come on over here. Enmity of the dead. 41. Oh, of course. There are so many racial deeds. Enmity of the goblins, enmity of the wolves, and enmity of the wargs. All of these things. We're only seeing a very small portion of them because we're hobbits, and hobbits just get wolves, spiders, and goblins, and the rest of them we're pretty chill with. Sandbart says a happy cat is a good thing. Absolutely. We are coming up on, I don't know, maybe 9 months of having these cats, and they're definitely a lot more settled in, a lot more comfortable than they were in the first couple of months. All right, so yes, this is fine. This is a good cascade. We're cascading through the rest of the enmity of the Blahs. I'm still not convinced of that, though. So what is 40? If we come back in here, 40 was enmity of the dead. So we were looking at enmity of the goblins? Yes. So the real question is, why is enmity of the dead 3 not tripping our logic? And I'm noticing the cascade checking, we're only seeing that starting at 41. But enmity of the goblins was 39. So do we have an issue here? Yes. We do. So that needed to start at K because the first thing we do is we increment it by 1. So let's go ahead and reload, fixing that. Off by 1 errors are super easy to do. I'm in good company. So if we check that, okay, we're starting with 40. Awesome. So that's the right thing to start with. The very next one, which is Enmity of the Dead 3. But Enmity of the Dead 3 should have a different tier than Enmity of the Goblins. Let's find that deed. Okay, so this is right here. We can see it's a tier equals 1. Enmity of the Goblins. And the next one, I'm expecting to have a tier equals 0. Or non-existent at all. And we can see tier doesn't exist. So for that very first one, we should already be opting out. And that worries me that we're not. Oh! No. Some notes from earlier. I forgot to save that. No, we're good. We're good. Because those are hidden deeds and they shouldn't be counted. We should just check past them until we get to the first one. I bet number 54 here is alluring, which is where we exit out. So, alluring, well, really the emotes, 54, and done. Driving myself crazy with this. Okay, so we have a bunch of hidden deeds. We are iterating past them to find something that is not hidden so that we can see what tier are you and do we care about. Because we should not stop cascading necessarily. Now, in reality, yeah, no, I think that is fine. I'm trying to come up with some complicated edge cases of whatever, but no, I think that's good. So, I just chose a wonky one here to go play around with for this. So if we come to, say, the wary, awesome. We check, we get to the next thing, we stop. If we do unscathed, we still stop when we need to. Great. What about, okay, fireworks. What about for love of midsummer? Okay, so we're seeing some nice things here. If we come on out to Eriador Breland, the Wildwood, let's go ahead and do Slayer of the Wildwood. We can see those all finish off. Awesome. Execution of the Wicked, we're back to that working. Barrow Downs, we can go ahead and finish that. And, okay, I think we have hunted down those issues. Telerian asks, do you know if there is a Lua method to get the War Steed cosmetics? I seem to be blind, or there is none. I think you're asking about the ones that are currently equipped, and off the top of my head, I would say no, probably not. Probably not a Lua method for that. I think Lua at least will distinguish whether you are on a war mount or not. You can tell that much. But in general, what equipment you or your mount are wearing is not available. But if anyone in chat knows more, let me know. Now, if it's not a live thing you want to do with plugins and you just want to know, it's possible that an import over on LOTRO Companion might have such things. Here we have mounts. What about... I guess I'm not seeing it for that. It's not something I've ever looked for. So, sorry, Delirian. I do not think the answer is yes. Okay, let's come on into Fork and start getting rid of some of those debug outputs. So, we can see one online 285. Great. 285. We're going to go ahead and kill that. I'm a little worried about that less than equal instead of equals equals, but I think in general, if you jump out several tiers, we need to stop. And so I think I'm happy with that. Because it's just not a cascading thing. The Redhead says, that would be nice to have a way to know what War Steed cosmetics you already have when you don't yet have a War Steed. Telerian says, I keep running into problems since I am doing a statistics plugin for German client, and my data keeps getting messed up when localization files change. Telerian, are you saying your data gets messed up when you change your client language from English to German, or German to French, or French to English? Or are you saying something else, like when the actual game client files change? Heron Bard agrees with Little Redhead. It would be nice. Alright, lines 271. We got a debug here. Alright, if possible deed, we should no longer have possible deed equal to nil. So, line 663, we can go ahead and get rid of this. Is category deed? Actually, deed should not be nil, so dump out some information. I'm going to keep that one for now. I might not commit it, but I'll keep it for now. And then if current deed is nil, oh, that was accidental left in there, 693. We do not want that. Let's hope that that didn't actually affect our testing here. Let's go ahead and reload the plugin. Go ahead and do this. Okay. And then that. Okay. I'm not seeing any error messages pop up, so we're in good state. Awesome. Let's double check here. So we have that, we have this. All right. So that is some good news. We can come on in and start committing this bug fix change. So first of all, what was that? That was the get deed skip info. And we're going to go ahead and say fixed issue where get deed skip info was getting called with a nil deed. Awesome. So that was specifically amusing. That was only this. And the rest of this was ancillary optimization type stuff. Okay. But we're going to go ahead and add this is category deed. We'll include that as part of this commit. Will we? No, I'm not going to. Okay. So that was a small fix. Oops. And then tweaked cascade logic to stop earlier. Okay, and so this cascading, good. This one, instead of a for, we're doing a while. And that'll let us stop earlier as well. Awesome. And then we still have this output function. I'm gonna think about that. Tellurian. For instance, the cats from the Christmas package had no translation, but I found a way to get around that. The words to be cosmetics weren't translated at first, and now need to change since it was translated. Except for the saddle. So Tellurian, something I've tried to get better about is, since I'm using the exports from the LOTRO companion a lot, I've tried to get better about making some small programs to kind of automatically pull the information over that I want, and then have a way to override that information if for some reason I don't like it. Like the minimum level of a deed for in a pear tree, for instance. Like the food itself, you cannot eat it until level 95. So the fact that the deed itself has a minimum level of 1 is just frustrating, because like you're going to look at this uncompleted deed for 94 levels. So I just override that. It's like, no, it actually has a minimum deed of 95. I don't care what you say. Game data files. But that's a way to kind of automatically pull over some of those translations. Aaron Bart asks, when you're making these corrections, this is just for plugins, correct? No one can touch the code base, right? And that is correct. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not an SSG employee. I have no access to the game. This is only plugins. And players always have the choice of whether they want a plugin to run or not. A plugin can be a misbehaving plugin. So if you are a dastardly person, your plugin could go and maybe overwrite the save files of some other plugins or something. But plugins are restricted to the plugin world. So you can make stuff appear on the screen in World of Warcraft, in Lord of the Rings Online, but you can't affect the state of the game. You can't communicate with the server or anything. And you can only interact with data files that are in the plugin data directory. So yes, this is just all about plugins. Yes, Tellurian points out that you were able to go into the shop and preview a mount, and that would pop open the Warsteed panel. At some point, I think there was a problem with doing previews, but I'm curious. Let's see. Warsteed. I just want the cosmetic stuff. Well, I'm not sure how to do a preview of one of these things. What about a saddle? Character, Warsteed upgrades. Cosmetics. Warsteed cosmetics. There we go. All right. Well, if there's a way to preview them anymore, I do not know what it is. Yeah. Arthur highlights importantly, as a plugin, you can't make arbitrary network connections. You can't access the file systems outside of the plugin area. You are very much in a sandbox world. Aaron Bard was in a music circle at Bree once where hostile bats suddenly attacked the crowd. I think there was an issue with something getting out of an instance. There was some sort of an instance where you had an effect where bats would spawn, and if you left the instance, the bats would still spawn. I believe they have corrected that. The Gundabad bats can no longer escape. But for a while, Green Dragon Friday over had the occasional bat show up. Yeah. Chicken says the item in the shop used to have a hanger on the icon to show that it was supporting. Yeah, that would be nice to have back. Funny thing is, over on Treebeard, we just hit level 75, so I now have access to the third tab here for the War Steed, but I don't have access to War Steeds yet, and I won't for like 6 months. So that's a funny side effect of how this works. Okay, awesome. So we've gone ahead and fixed a bug. Very cool. So let's go ahead and talk about mounts. So what I went ahead and did ahead of this was in our deed data, I went ahead and marked out with a tag called mount equals large or mount equals small to highlight whether it included horses or ponies. And so if you are a race that only uses ponies, then you shouldn't see the larges, and if you're a race that only uses horses, you shouldn't see the smalls. So that's what we want right now. And we have a way to look up the race of the character. I think we're already doing that. And so let's come back in and take a look at this. Okay, so we have the get race. Let's go ahead and do a search just for all upper caps race and see where this happens. We have the lookup table. We know what the races are, or at least how they should be displayed. But it would be nice to have a lookup table that just says, for a given race, this is either large or small for mounts. Let's see. Don't need that. Get race. Where did that get set? Awesome. When we do a check care data, every time you load in the plugin, we re-get your race. So if you have done a race change token, we get whatever your current race is. So we know that's going to be populated with one of these integers. Now this is subject to having an issue if a new race comes along. This needs to be updated, but it is a one-line change here. Okay, so we need a lookup table. And it would be nice to have it in a place where it doesn't impact anything else. Let's see. Deed info is already a very large file, so I don't think it's going to go here. But we can make a new one. So, new file, and this will be I mean, almost, it's such a small table. Let's mock it out first and then decide where it's going to go. So this, we're gonna just put it at the top of plugin functions for a minute. And what we want it to be is race to mount size lookup, sure. And in case we have a 0, we're just going to say it's large. And here, let's actually keep these. Nope, I've hit the wrong key. I don't mean to be duplicating that line. Okay, so what we want is to keep those. And instead, what we're going to do is large. In fact, what we want is a large amount equals large. And small. Cool. We want to avoid just hard coding those strings in elsewhere, so mount small equals small. Okay. Mount large. And that'll let us go ahead and just copy in mount large. And we also know that applies for men and elf and high elf and Bjorning, but mount small for dwarf and hobbit and stout axe. Okay, so what that gives us is a way to say, given that we have the race, we can know what string we're looking at for mount large. And so if the mount tag exists and it matches the mount tag for us, then we're good to go. So if we go back to, that big function we're looking at, which was making use of the get deed skip info function. That's basically a large function that says, given the class and the race and the vocations and the level and all of these things, should this be visible? Should we care about it? And so it would be nice for local mount type equals, and then we need to go ahead and make use of this. So race to mount size lookup of race. With the only question of, is this giving us a number? I sure hope so. Equals 0, awesome, yes, good. So we want to go ahead and, after all of this other stuff, if local deed is mount deed equals. Now I have just passed this off to subfunctions, and that's probably a good idea. Function is mount deed. So local is mount deed equals false. Return is mount deed is the last line of the function, and then in here if deed dot, and I want to say we just used mount. Yep, mount. There we go. If deed dot mount, then local is mount deed equals true. And now, all of this can, some would argue, should be replaced by a one-line function, which is basically return d.mount. Does not equal nil. I think that's fine. The only reason I'm making it a little bit more verbose is right now it is a simple one check. I mean, maybe that's preemptively complicating things. It's harder to insert debug logic into a function like this. If I want output state of the function, if I wanted to output whatever, it's a little bit harder to kind of step through and say what's going wrong if something is going wrong. Whereas with a function like this, there's a lot of places for me to put a debug statement. And a good compiler or even a good interpreter, as far as Lua is concerned, should end up with something that's very, very similar in the resulting lower level code. But yes, the reality is all we're really doing is checking to see, is mount not equal to nil? We could even add nil check for deed, but deed shouldn't be nil. Oh, which we're going to do. We can go ahead and do the nicer one. Okay, we'll go ahead and start with that and see how we feel about it. Why are there so many spaces after that? Okay, so we have an isMountDeed function. And so what we can do is say if deed is mount deed, I'm second guessing myself. If deed is mount deed and current deed dot deed equals we're going to call it race mount type, then end. And that should be a not equal to. So if deed is mount deed and current deed dot deed, it's not equal race mount dot type, or race mount type, then do stuff. So let's take a look at what that would look like. We can go ahead and slot that in here at the end. And that is going to say hide deed equals true. That is to say we don't care about mount deeds unless they are for us. And really that should just work. That would be nice. Let's see if it works. First of all, let's go on over to the collections tab, which is the easiest part of this. There we go. And get something. So we can see writer is a nice one, writer. So let's just do a sort here. And in fact, we picked up a couple of requires purchase ones as well. So ideally, we're only going to see half of those if we go ahead and do this. Now what I'd like to do actually is unload the plugin and then come back in to the plugin files and just blow them away. Not the plugin files, the plugin data files. Blow them away, so we're starting over fresh. Okay. So since we're doing that, we do want to turn on verbose logging, and we'll go ahead and search for writer. Nothing in here, but over in class race epic, we can go ahead and expand. Was it writing? No, it's just not getting shown. Awesome. So we're over filtering. So in order to know what's going on here, let's get the ID of a specific one that we think should be shown. So writer of the free peoples. So we know the ID is such, so we can come on in and start looking at what's going on with that. So if current deed.id equals this, then what we want to do is know some stuff. Debug. Writer of the free people. What are you? Writer of the free peoples. Okay. Writer of the free peoples. Deed is mount deed. Let's figure that out. Deed is mount deed equals. And race mount type. I want to know that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and reload this. If I use the reload button, it would be slightly faster. Note to self. Okay, so writer of the free peoples. Deed is mount deed equals true. Race mount type equals small. I forgot to actually write out what the current deed's mount is. Let's do that. Current deed.mount equals, and we'll dump that as well. Great. Reload. Okay, so we can see a race mount. Small, current mount. Okay, small, great. We encountered it twice. So we can see that is true, and we can see small equals small. Let's give that a try. Let's figure out which ones we're hiding. Fantastic. We can see we're hiding too many of them. Not a surprise. What was it? Rider of the Free People. Is that in here? Yeah, Rider of the Free Peoples. So we can see it was said hiding it. But obviously we do not want that. That should sure say mount, shouldn't it? Let's try that. It's probably a case of me probably saying the word deed while I was trying to type the word mount. That's not going to work. Okay, awesome. Sweet. So, we can see we now have Rider of Rohan, Rider of the Free People, Sunstrider, Winter Rider. So, if we go ahead and select Rider of Rohan and do a reload, we don't expose in the UI what that ID is, but it is in the save file. So if we come on in to plugin data, coming into all characters, we can find the data for Affodil. And if we pull that on up, we can see in the completed ones, I marked this one as complete. So let's double check that that's a small people's mount. Okay, so this is mount equals small. Awesome. Love it. And if we want to go ahead and kind of fool out the plugin a bit, we can go ahead and come on back to where race is initialized. Okay. Car data equals that. There we go. And we can just come on over and say, you know what, instead of that, we're going to substitute in a different one. So we are going to be a high elf, which is 117. So, temporarily a high elf. So let's check that out. Let's be a high elf. If we reload this, we should see no Rider of Rohan completed. Let's go ahead and instead complete Rider of the Free Peoples. We're going to go ahead and refresh the plugin and come back in to our save file, and now we can see a different one. So we can see one of them is type mount small, and one of them is mount type large. That's delightful. Okay, so it would be I think it's beyond the scope of what I want to do right now to go in and sort out which one, like if you are a character that had one of them marked and it should be the other one, fixing that is something we could do programmatically, but I think I'd want to stick that in the version 2 to version 3 upgrade path, so you only get it once. So let's make a note that that would be something interesting to do, and that way we don't have to do it today. Alright, so version 2.0 to version 3.0, upgrade, add code to check for the various mount deeds. If only one is completed and the character if only one is completed, and it's the one that existed in version 2.0, and the character has it marked complete, then swap in the ID of the race appropriate mount deed. If only one's completed, and it's one that exists in 2.0, and it was marked complete, then swap the ID of the race appropriate mount deed for that save entry. Okay, so that note to future me has just absolved present me of the problem of fixing this, because it is something that could be fixed. Now is the right time to fix it. So before, back when these data files were being based off of wiki entries and personal experiences, that whatnot, you would only ever see a single Rider of the Free People deed on your character. Makes me wonder though, if you complete that and then do a race change, will you see both of them in your completed deed log? I suspect the answer is yes. Because I suspect that the internal client logic for the deed log is way simpler, and it just says, when you click completed, show me all the ones that have been marked completed, whether or not they match your current race or vocation or whatever. Well, the Reddit says, I went from an elf to a hobbit, and I think it removed the one deed. I may have to go look. Yeah, it definitely, if it's an in-progress deed, they'd probably wipe it. But if it's a completed deed, I wonder if you would keep it. Specifically for collections for mounts that include horses or ponies. Because on the one hand, it would make sense to keep it. You did it. On the other hand, it would make sense to not keep it, or just to hide it, because it's no longer relevant. I mean, it's a bull-roar question. All right, but we can go ahead and come on into the code changes and figure out what's going on. Okay, the temporarily high elf thing, we need to get rid of that. That's not going to fly for my hobbit. Okay, so we got rid of some white space here. That's fine. We have a new function, is mount deed. We have the race mount type. We have the is mount deed, and then we make use of it. But we can see we have some debug statements in here. So line 785 of a different file. 785, cool. So this specific one we can get rid of, and this we can get rid of. That'll make this a much nicer load process. There we go. Okay, so this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. That can be a separate commit. And then the lookup. The race to mount size lookup really feels like it should not live in the plugin functions file. Is there a better place for it? I mean, things were accumulating in the deed info file, and that was fine, but it got really big, and that's tough for parsing. Aaron Bart says, these streams are recorded so I can look them over again later. Yes, that is true. You'll be able to find them both here on Twitch. There's a playlist on the LOTRO stream channel that contains just these things, or you can just go look at all videos and just do a search for Plugin Along. And these will also get uploaded to the Life Beyond the Shire YouTube channel. What? Oh, hooray! Little Redhead has just made a link to it in chat, youtube.com/@lifebeyondtheshire. And you can find these there as well. Okay. So adding another data file seems silly. But I did it for these other ones. Well, region info ballooned to other things. Conflicting quest was its own thing, yeah. Deed info strings. Okay, we'll just make a new file. It's going to be called deed lookup tables. It'll need to be named differently. There we go. And in here, we're going to go ahead and make sure we remember to import it. Currently, everything's being imported at main, so we're going to do that as well. So, import cube plugins.deed tracker data files dot deed lookup tables. And we're going to go ahead and get this stuff out of here. That was always the plan, and now we have a place for it. So that's going into deed lookup tables, but the important thing is that when it's being used, we do need to put in data files dot underscore race to mount size lookup, because it's in a different namespace. Or at least that's my mental model of it. Okay, let's go ahead and reload, make sure we didn't break anything with that particular one. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and complete Winter Rider just to reassure myself that it's still working. Looks great. Okay. I know you think it's undefined. Okay, so we have a few more changes to commit here. We have the new file, we have main, that inclusion of it, and we have this change here, where we refer to it by its fully qualified name. Alright, we can come into our Drew file, using the character's race to only show the things that they can ride. Awesome. Stage that. We'll stage that. Chew. And done. Oh, that's very satisfying. Now, in this case, I'm just going to say remove the trailing white space. Completely innocuous commit, but doing it by itself just separates it out from the real meaningful things. Okay, so we still have this debug here. Is category should never be nil, the deed that we're passing should never be nil, and hiding this by actively returning false instead of letting it happen is concerning. And that's why I didn't want to commit this. Is category should never be called with a nil value. There should always be a deed being passed in, and therefore, if it is passed in, we would kind of like to know about it, at least for now. And so this is a little bit more defensive code, but it's going to mask problems, and right now there could be a lot of those. So I'm going to go ahead and discard. Yep, I'm going to get rid of that. I had to convince myself that I was saying the right thing. Oh, Little Redhead says, okay, I don't think I had any writing collection deeds on that character. For some reason, I think I had to redo one of the pet collection deeds. Interesting. Well, I cannot speak to that. I've never done a race change token. Maybe I did over on Bulwar, but I don't think so. I mean, why change if you're already a hobbit? Okay. Now, one of the problems is those collections are hard to complete. There's the reputation one. There's one that comes from, I don't even know if it's in reputation, but like Ambassador to the Elves is the reputation one, and I think if you mount I think there is a deed for mounting the various steeds for some of the reputation things. But I would expect that to be in race and social. But I have too many over here to really be able to find anything. So much stuff. That's fine. That's a problem with a completionist character. Needs better organization methods. Cool. Okay, so that was really the main thing I wanted to do today is large versus small mounts. Delirian says, if I recall correctly, there's also deeds for the 2013 through 2017 festival mounts. Delirian, you are correct. And those actually, if I go ahead and search for these, there are also variations of these for large and small players. And so when I pulled in all of the duplicates in here, and there were a bunch of them, a lot of them were ones that require some sort of a purchase nowadays. And so they're in the not actively available category, which is why they show up as this light blue color. They all have at least one that requires Mythler coin. Now, requires purchase is a little bit of a misnomer. It depends on what your view of purchase is, because you can acquire Mythler coin from LOTRO points, and you can get LOTRO points from in-game play. But ultimately, if you have to spend more than in-game gold to get the thing, I just mark it as requires purchase, and you know, whether that's a good denomination or distinction or not is, it's not a very large portion of the deeds either way. Okay. Egg Arthur was sharing a very interesting thing, which is that there's at least one plugin out there that tries to account for the issue here, which is to say if you press F12, the HUD should go away. And if you press it again, it should come back. That's the default key. If you've rebound it, then just swap that in your head. I'm going to keep saying F12. But if you press the HUD toggle key, the built-in game stuff should go away. And it's nice when plugins can duplicate that. So if I have the plugin window open, I press F12, we know to pay attention to F12. But there are two ways to re-show the HUD. You can press F12, or you can do something that causes the system menu to open up. In this case, press escape. It might be possible to open that some other way, but actually, okay, I'm gonna sidetrack myself. But system, no options. This option panel. Okay, apparently I have Control R. Really? Cool. All right. So no, it is just the escape key, not just showing that window. So if you show that window by hitting escape, the HUD comes back. But if you have another window open, escape will close those windows first before popping up the system menu. So if the HUD is hidden and you press escape, we've just closed in the inventory window, and with the second escape, we've popped up the HUD. So it is possible for a plugin to know whether the escape key has been pressed. It's possible for a plugin to know if F12 has been pressed, but using just those two pieces of information, it is not possible for a plugin to conclusively know whether or not the HUD was shown or not from an escape key press. But Agartha was sharing some code that purports to do just that. And I'm interested in this, but I'm not sure how it's supposed to work. Because if your plugin has hidden itself in response to an F12 key, then no window of your plugin should be visible. And so I want to read through this code here and get a sense of what it thinks it's doing. Whenever I see a binary number here for the action, I like to just pull out the Windows calculator and grab the hexadecimal version of that. I find it a little bit nicer when dealing with those kinds of internal constants. That being said, yeah, so that is the F12 button. Great. So we're just going to annotate this a little bit. So this code has two things, the escape button and the HUD. Hello, Raiders! Welcome to the LOTRO channel. We are doing a dive into how to make plugins for Lord of the Rings Online. So I do have Lord of the Rings Online running here in the background. but a lot of the time here is being spent otherwise. Well, people are saying something in the chat that I don't recognize, but hello. Okay, so the problem at hand, for those just joining us, is when you're writing a plugin, you want to respect the hide the HUD or toggle HUD key. Okay, A. Arthur has mentioned a thing. So just to spell it out, when we press the toggle HUD key, we want to be able to hide or show things, especially good for taking screenshots of this beautiful landscape as we enter into dusk here, or if you're filming video or whatnot. And so when you're in that state, if you press escape, that will bring us back out, unless there's some window like the inventory open, in which case it requires a second escape. Okay, so Agartha says part of the magic of this code is that it always makes its own window invisible when escape is pressed, regardless of what else escape may do. Oh, that's what that says. Nice. Well, the redhead thinks that says by Durin's beard, which is a reasonable thing to say. Okay, so we have two branches of code here. Oh, hey. They say they're actually German, and that's our usual rating catchphrase. It's a delightful rating catchphrase. Unfortunately, I will be not speaking in German. I know a little bit of Dutch, and what I know of Dutch is helpful when reading the rules to German board games, but it has not been helpful in learning how to speak or understand spoken German. So, welcome, or welcome. Okay, so we have two branches of code here. We have if the key is an escape, or the key is F12 by default, but toggling the HUD. So let's look at them separately. So if the key is escape, then we're going to set ourselves to not be visible, not be visible, not be visible, not be visible. And if the debug window, also not be visible. If it's a HUD, if alert HUD state. Okay, so we're toggling the state we think the F12 is. So if we think the HUD is visible, then we go ahead and restore the visibility of these specific windows to what it was when it was turned off. If we set the HUD to be off, then we save off the is visible state into these various variables. Excellent question from Bill in chat. I have a question. Is there somewhere to download add-ons and plugins from, and how do we know which ones are good to use or not? What a great question. So, the first thing I would say is, just like Mubot has put in the chat there, your first stop I would definitely recommend to be LOTROinterface.com. There's a section, if you go to downloads, where you can browse both LOTRO and DDO plugins, though I have no knowledge of DDO plugins. And within LOTRO, there's all sorts of different categories. So if I was looking for a minstrel-specific thing, I might go to class-specific, where I might go to minstrel, and then, hey, cool, there's a couple of minstrel-specific plugins, or Rune Keeper. There's a Rune Keeper attunement display. Cool. Warden, I know there's a few of these, because wardens are complicated to play, I hear. And so this is a lot of fun to just browse. That exclamation plugins command there also listed some that come recommended by various members of the LOTRO stream team here. things like deed tracker, which is what we're working on right now in code, but also buff bars, minstrel buff, opaque quest tracker, titan bar. We should probably get minstrel buff updated to minstrel buff 2. I'll make a note of that. Update the plugins command with the new minstrel buff. Cool. Opaque quest tracker, titan bar, travel 1 to 2. Yes, all of these are great. Daily tasks is probably less relevant nowadays. I'll make a note of that as well. So there's a lot of places to start, and one of the things when it comes to plugins for Lord of the Rings Online, one of the first questions is, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get some assistance playing your character? Are you trying to make the user interface different? There's a whole other place, other way to affect how all the windows work called skins. So if you want how it looks to change, you might be looking at skins. Aaron Bart, I will come back to that in just a moment. So one of the simplest plugins that is on that list is called the Opaque Quest Tracker. And what it does, just like with the chat window, where you can come and change the opacity of this chat window to make it easier or harder to see the text, but by sacrificing what's behind it, the Opaque Quest Tracker is this plugin that just puts a box underneath the quest tracking area. And for some people, that makes a big difference in the readability of the quest text. And you can come in and do things like change the opacity, and you can also change that color of the opacity and stuff like that. So you might find a green background doesn't detract from the background as much, but you can still read all the text. So yeah, start with kind of thinking, what do I want to do? Oh, Nofi says got to go. Bye-bye. Thanks for popping in and checking us out. So what do you want to do? Are you looking for help with your class? And so on. Yeah, Telerian answers, daily task would tell you which of the task items may be used where. And that was super, super awesome. And possibly the inspiration for what the people here at SSG, well, I shouldn't say here, but what the people at SSG did, which was to, no, stop typing, I just want to pull this off, which was to add that information to the tooltip of the object. We can see these glossy essences can be turned in the Lonelands, Northdowns, or Cardon. That was basically what the daily tasks plugin did. Told you which things were actually trashed, you could just get rid of them, and which things could be effectively turned in and where. I think it had a little bit more information, so you could actually say, like, where are these task boards, what geographical locations, like are they in Estelden, are they in Osgurth, that kind of thing. But this is super useful. So the daily tasks, I think, still maybe has a place if you want that hyper granular detail about, yeah, but where in the North Downs can I turn this in? Because a lot of times what you can turn in the Forsaken Inn is not what you can turn in at Osgurth, for instance. Same thing with a lot of other areas. Like they're kind of like level graded so that, you know, you're turning in stuff at the Forsaken Inn that is dropping around the Forsaken Inn, but that's not the same stuff necessarily that drops by Osgurth. Yeah, Telerian points out, at the time of development, task items were not marked, like, they didn't have this red text. So all it just said was, it's gathered from the corpse and can be sold to vendors for coin, and that was it. And it says the task had different amounts of items needed. Interesting. For my knowledge, right now in the game, all tasks require 10 items except one of the ones in the Limelight Gorge. Maybe more than one. A non-zero number in the Limelight Gorge require 1 or 3, for instance, instead of 10. To my knowledge, that's the exception. But yeah, if there's other ones out there, I just haven't paid attention or haven't encountered them yet. Anyway, so yeah, Bill in chat. I don't know how useful that was, but those are some ones that were recommended. I definitely think things like travel window are very useful. Things like Titan bar are highly customizable, and that can be a little intimidating. So if you're not used to plugins, you might find that is a harder place to start. And you definitely could take advantage of that LOTRO Plugin Compendium linked in chat, which can automate the process of downloading these plugins. So if we go ahead and open it up, once it is installed, it will look like this. Where it'll tell you what is installed. It'll highlight any that it thinks need updating. This is a bit treacherous for plugin developers because what it's really doing is showing you ones where the versions don't match. And since my version is newer, it doesn't match. So I have to be careful not to update here. But it's very good for highlighting when other people have updated their plugins. And you can always add a new one. So if I want to go ahead and add, let's say Travel Window 2. I can just click it here. I click the add button and it is done. It's delightful. Lunar Water did a great job with this. Okay. So, Delirian says those are the only two exceptions I am aware of in the Limelight Gorge. Nice. I was struggling with Limelight Gorge on one character, and it's like, oh, this is going to take so long, until I actually bothered to look at the task board's quest descriptions. Like, oh, it only takes one of these? Sweet. Turn in. And that helped a lot. Okay, awesome. So, let's come back to this. So, what I am seeing is HUD is on restore window state. Over here, I'm seeing HUD is off, turning off, save off window state. So HUD is turning on, restore window state. That's all fine. For the escape key, this is a separate thing. A lot of plugins like to respond to the escape key just like the built-in windows by closing themselves. But as a plugin author, 70 times 1C in chat says, all of this is safe to install, no viruses, etc. So that is a two-part question, or a two-part answer, I should say. When you download something from LOTRO Interface, part of their uploading guidelines are that they scan it for things like viruses, executable files, and so on. And so those should be rejected by default. But when you download something, and let's go ahead and find one, that's daily task. When you click download, what you get is a zip file. And in that zip file are the files that should go into the plugins directory. Let's go ahead and extract that. So I'm going to use Windows, right click, extract all, do it, and we get a folder. This folder, Vinny, that goes into my plugins directory. LOTRO is going to look for a .plugin file in there, and in that .plugin file, it's going to be told, using package, go look at this file and try to load it as if it is a Lua file. LOTRO will do that, and if it is a Lua file, great, it loads. If it's not, it does not. And so short answer is, there should not be anything malicious in the upload, but even if there were, sitting in your plugins directory, Lord of the Rings Online is not going to do anything with it that would activate that maliciousness. However, there's nothing that stops a person from coming into these directories and clicking on a file themselves. And so you just want to be careful, just like with any other file you download. By default, plugins are safe to run on your computer. Plugins are safe to run within Lord of the Rings Online. They can't delete your character. They can't upload personal information about you to a website. None of that. All they can do is interact within the game in a very small sandbox. But on the off chance that something slips through, as long as you don't go into these plugin folders and start randomly running things, like, oh, there's an RTF here, I'll open that up. As long as you're not doing that, you run no risk of activating something malicious, even if there is something malicious, which in general there is not. And if you stick to the really popular plugins, for instance, some of the ones in this list come recommended and are used by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Some of the download counts on these plugins is staggering. And so, I would say, just as with any other file that you download, just be careful and thoughtful in how you handle it. And if you let LOTRO do the handling, you're good. So, sorry, whenever someone asks, oh, is this safe? Like, the default answer is basically, but there's an asterisk there, right? And I don't want to just leave that hanging. But the short answer is basically, yes. If you use them in the way that they're meant to be used, they are safe. That being said, it is possible for plugins to do, I would call them more prankstery things than malicious things. When you load a plugin, it is possible for the plugin to put a control over the game that is invisible, but blocks you from clicking on the game. It's more of a practical joke than anything. So just because plugins can't maliciously harm you or your computer doesn't mean they can't like interrupt your enjoyment of the game. So, it's helpful to stick to the plugins you know and love until you get more comfortable. That being said, if you're ever having any trouble with a plugin, you can always type in, let me make sure that's visible. Yep, there we go. You can always type in /plugins space unload, whether or not a plugin is actively, being prankstery, because plugins can't intercept keyboard typing. So you can always type /plugins space unload, enter, bam, you have no more plugins loaded. As Little Redhead points out, if someone pranks via plugin, people are going to talk about it, people are going to know, people are going to stop downloading the plugin. So it's just one of those things to be aware that like plugins can interfere with your ability to play the game if you're using a mouse, but like just don't run that plugin. And we as players get to control which plugins are automatically loaded for which characters. And it defaults to no plugins for no characters. So if I want this opaque quest tracker plugin to automatically load, I have to intentionally come in here and select for which characters that will load automatically. And the default is none. None plugins. And so that's just another safeguard, which is to say you're not going to get it unless you opt into it and you control just how far you opt into it. So if you want to try a plugin, the simplest thing is don't click that automatically load for button. Load it up, see if you like it or not. And if you don't, or if anything goes weird, the next time you log in, you're not going to get that plugin. So you always have that failsafe, and you can also control that dialog from the character selection screen. So if you think you had any problem with a plugin at character selection screen, go to the plugin manager and disable that plugin for all characters, and you're good to go. Delirian says, so this prank could be extended to closing the game. As far as I know, an infinite loop inside a plugin will crash the client. Some infinite loops, Delirian, if they involve function calls, will probably exceed the script stack and will probably error out. But it is possible for a plugin to accidentally, or possibly prankstery, cause the client to close. I've certainly seen it during development when I've done something wrong, and 99% of the time I do something wrong and I just get an error. But every once in a while I do something especially wrong when I've doing some development, and then the client will just close. But that's the ultimate reset button. The client closes, you bring it back up, you say don't load that plugin. And so as plugin authors, we try very hard not to let that kind of thing escape into the wild, but it's always possible, which is one of the reasons why if you ever have a problem with your game, Standing Stone Games support would kindly ask you to turn off all your plugins and then make sure that you still have that problem. Because plugins add an unknown variable to the mix, a variable that Standing Stone Games takes no responsibility for. Like, they offer the plugin ability, but if you download a plugin and then it makes your game experience weird, they would request you just stop using the plugin. I'd definitely stop using it before you contact them about, I've got a problem. Make sure you really have a problem and it's not the plugin having a problem. Okay, so Egg Arthur sent code that when you press the escape button, they're closing their windows. So let's go ahead and say that. Close our windows in response to escape. And when you're toggling HUD, When the HUD is turning off, save the state of the windows, and when the HUD is turning on, restore the state of the windows. That is, when the HUD comes on, you don't want all of your windows to suddenly be like, surprise, we're here. You only want the ones to come back that were hidden. For instance, oh, I've unloaded all my plugins. Let's load one back up. Let's get the D tracker back in here. So if the D tracker is open, and in fact, D tracker has multiple windows, let's go ahead and trigger one of them by coming in here to area door and going ahead and automatically completing the old forest. And we're doing this just to have something in our completion window. So if you press the hide HUD button, all of those windows should go away, and only the windows that were visible before should come back. So if I close the main D-tracker window and I hide the HUD, bring it back, only the window that was visible should still be visible. So we want to go ahead and save off the visible state of those windows. Are they visible or not, closed or not, when the HUD hides, so that we can restore just the windows. So far this seems like very normal code. Could be better commented, but that's all fine. So what I see, when escape is pressed, close our windows. When the HUD hides, save off our state. When the HUD comes back, load the state. Oh, fair enough. I keep saying the code from AgArthur. AgArthur found this in the LOTRO plugin. AgArthur is not responsible for this code other than showing it to me. What I would say, AgArthur, is I don't see how this is handling the escape button issue, which is to say that escape can also toggle the HUD, because we will get into this branch of code when that escape button happens, but this code doesn't seem to care about, do I think that the HUD is present or not? And this branch of code is only coming into play when you press that default F11 key, the toggle HUD key. So right now, the plugin, D-Tracker plugin, we can get it out of sync where it still thinks the HUD is hidden. We hide the HUD officially, but now D-Tracker thinks it's back. And so I'm not seeing a specific thing in this code that tries to account for that. I just don't know how it would, because the plugin itself is the one hiding elements. So if I don't intentionally hide a thing, it is going to be visible when the HUD is hidden, just like this little button is here. Now the window. Like, the plugin's in charge of making sure that we hide that. Agatha says it's appropriate for a plugin that if you always make its window invisible whenever escape is pressed. That's fair. The big thing is a lot of plugins have some sort of a token on screen, a little button, a little whatever, have some element on screen that intentionally should not respond to the escape button. Windows, yeah, definitely. If you have Windows up and you press the escape button, you would expect those to be closed. And then, let's see, so if I come in here, press escape, I would expect those both to be closed. Interesting. D-Tracker didn't pay attention to it. I wonder if that's a bug. Interesting. Let's add a note. D-Tracker doesn't seem to react to escape to close the window if HUD is off. I mean, probably because the window is not shown anyway, but escape might want to override that. Okay, so what I think this is a nice example of how to basically react to the escape key, close your stuff that needs to close, and the HUD key, save off your state when it goes away, bring back just the ones that were hidden when it comes back. I do think it's interesting that only 4 of them come back, but it saves off more than that. Alert main, okay. Also, I think it's interesting that they're in a different order, so I'm going to reorder those. So, alert main. Oh, interesting. these are, oh, we're saving off 3 states. Alert main state, log state, and log viewer. Okay. And we're setting visible to false flat out. No, that's alert main, that's template. Login viewer. Oh, okay, okay. So it saves it off and hides it, brings it back to that saved off state. That's all fine. And then the main and the template just use the same visibility. Okay. Yeah. So yes, if your plugin hides all of its windows when you hit escape, then you still will have a situation where your plugin can internally, this alert HUD state is trying to track, is the HUD on or off or not? Because that's our proxy. We don't actually know if the HUD's on or off, but we know it was probably on when our plugin loaded, because by default they load when your character comes in, HUD's on. And if we track every F12 since then, we will be consistent, except for that escape issue. And this code does not seem to account for that. And I'm not sure how a plugin would account for that. Because your stuff is not affected by the HUD hiding, unless you choose to make it affected by. Well, I gather I am stumped on what a solution would be, but I don't think this is the solution for that particular problem. But that being said, this is a pretty classic looking code. I think we do something very similar. So just out of curiosity, if we come into, yes, show me this. If we come into the key action toggle HUD, into the main window, we see something very similar. If the key action toggle HUD, we go ahead and we have a is HUD toggled on setting. We don't do the equals not, probably should, but then we set visible to the visibility, or we just set it to false, because that main when visible is a separate variable. And then we pass on that to another place. For the escape key, if it's visible, we close it, and we pass it on. So we do some of that same stuff. Somebody asked, is it possible to make the cursor in LOTRO more visible? Yeah, I think there already are some plugins like that. So mouse cursor highlighter advanced as a possibility. So let's go ahead and view that. Okay, so apparently you can do stuff. Heck, let's go ahead and give that a try. I haven't played around with that. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Cool, it's there. And we're going to come on in to our plugin manager. Whenever you add or remove plugins while LOTRO is running, go ahead and remember to hit this green arrow button or /plugins space refresh. It's the same thing. So refresh. Cool. And we can come on down to mouse cursor and load that. And that's my mouse cursor now. But we have an options, maybe? I don't know. So let's go back to the help page and say, how do we change this? Change command. Oh, there we go. Options. Options. MCHA. Okay, cool. So MCHA. There we go. Well, it's too visible. Says 70. Well, that could be. We can see there's a size here, so you might like it better as smaller. We can see there's RGB controls. There's a whole bunch of things. If we come to a color picker, let's make it more like blue, maybe? Whoa, that's interesting. Oh, is that just... Oh, is it double clicking? Oh, it might be double clicking. Not sure. Still, I love it when they give customizability, even if I don't understand how to do it. It looks like there's also an option for combat only, and so you'll get your cursor of whatever size when you're in combat, but not when you're just running around. Love it. It looks like you can have two separate profiles for being in combat or out of combat. Nice. All right, whoever made this, apparently Fortunas. Nice job. I like it. All right. I don't think it's for me. In my current cycle of eye functionality, I'm fortunate enough to be able to find the mouse cursor most of the time. Okay, that's interesting. So if we search for another cursor, that's the only one I find. But there may be other things, like if I search for mouse. Hey, mouse circle. I think mouse finder is one that I've seen people using. So let's go ahead and say mouse by Thurlor, who is an active developer here in the community. We go ahead and get that mouse finder, and cool. What options do we have? Show only when combat, cool. Again, it's going to default to kind of large, and it only shows up when you're moving your cursor. So if we go ahead and say no, let's bring that size down. Then anytime your cursor stops after a second, it disappears. But then you get that again. So it's not 100% precise because it's relying on being told, hey, the mouse moved, and then it goes ahead and redraws itself. So you'll see it lag a little bit if your mouse is going really far distances. But for just a gentle move, it's just trailing a little bit. There's also a way to cycle colors, apparently, which is just seems seizure-inducing, but it might be good for you. Here, let me make that a little bigger, and then, oh, yeah, I'm gonna turn that off. I bet that's really good for like some people and really terrible for other people. Cool, and then there's a reset to defaults. Nice. Okay, so that's Mouse Finder. To me, Mouse Finder seems a little bit simpler to get into and configure, but you know, it's nice that there's options. And then mouse gestures. Interesting. Don't know about that one. Slow color change would help in snow. Excellent point, Aaron Bard. If you're spending a lot of time in the Misty Mountains, a white circle or reticule might not help. Alright, mouse gestures. Put 8 skill items in a circle of quick slots. If you sweep in the direction of one of them while holding Control Alt Shift, the quick slot will be placed under your mouse as soon as you release one of them. Interesting. Make that bigger. Huh. I think that would be a really interesting mechanism. I don't think it's good for me, but I'm too used to the way I activate my skills as it is. But I think that's really interesting. Well, kudos to Musha for making that happen. Awesome. Okay. Well, we've had a delightful time here of fixing some bugs and making some features and chatting about plugins. I think we've reached the 2-hour mark. So at this point, I would say let's go ahead and throw any last minute questions, comments, concerns, etc. in the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to get a drink of water and make sure I haven't missed anything. And Bart says, thanks for all the good info. You are welcome. I'm going to go ahead and commit that to do file name. Alert her seems to use similar logic for escape / F12. Other. All right, and that returns our working directory into a nice, clean, only debug options setup. I'm going to go ahead and push out that one change. Awesome. And you know what? The save file format, I feel like it's almost done. There's probably some to-do items in here to go through a little bit, but we're really close to finding, I think, all of the extant bugs that were introduced as a result of changing the save file format. And one of the things I really like about the save file format is if we come on into my backup here, plugin along, here we go. Let's see, Treebeard, all characters. So if we come and look at the backup files, we can see the new deed tracker save file for one of my characters, Baramer, is 5K instead of 325K. Bavakar is 5K instead of 325K. So there's definitely a space savings to be had for lower level, newer characters. Their save file is going to be ridiculously small. And even for Affadil, who has done lots of things, it's still only 100K instead of 400K. So it's definitely a success in terms of not just making huge files that are there for no reason. But the intent was never really performance so much as making life easier. So hopefully it makes that too. All right. Well, I think Lintrev over here in Swanfleet has been a delightful place to hang out for, where are we, down here, for the last 2 hours. I'm really liking the music of the Before the Shadows, and I haven't been spending enough time in Before the Shadows content to hear it all. And so just getting that as background noise for the last 2 hours has been really nice. Hopefully you're able to hear any of it, but if not, I encourage you to go check it out. So, Egg Arthur, you say you're right. If you spam escape in F12 enough, then eventually even Alerter will show its windows even with the HUD off. I'm questioning whether it really takes that much, because the simple case of it is oh, right, because Alerter hides all of its windows. I would say for Alerter's situation, since escape hides all of its windows and there's no trace of it, I would assume you can reproduce it by showing a window. Wait, how would you reproduce that? Well, that state where it says, do I think the HUD is on or off? The basic thing is to trick it, right? So for Alerter, if you go into HUD with no windows open, even Alerters, and you press escape, internally it is now opposite, right? Now it thinks the HUD is off when it is on, and so now it will do the wrong thing going forward. So now you would open up Alerter, and then you press the HUD key, and it depends on when it saves off the visibility state of it. But if you open a window and part of its logic is it saves that off somewhere, then you should be able to make it. So Egg Arthur says, it could make all of them invisible and set the save state when escape is pressed. The problem is when escape is pressed, you don't know if any in-game windows were open, because if that inventory window is open, or a character screen, or social screen, or whatever, and you have the HUD on, when you hit escape, that escape does not toggle the HUD. That one does toggle the HUD. Now, you could be more complicated. You could have a timer going that kind of measures how long between two escapes, and if two escapes happen in relative sequence, you can ignore that second one. I think you could be clever like that. Like, start a timer with an escape, and within 5 seconds, any future escapes, or 2 seconds or whatever, any future escapes are just ignored. And then when that one's done, maybe start a new timer for the next escape. But you won't know for certain, because you could definitely hit escape and then F12. So you'd have to kind of include that as well in the logic of what's going on. And now my plugin is opposite. Okay, we're good. So if escape is pressed, you could screen out subsequent escapes, or I guess you'd have to and escapes within a certain number of seconds you just treat as one escape. And Bart says, sounds similar to the problem I had with pet stables and horse stable. When taking a bunch of screenshots, after a bunch of cycles of HUD, the shortcut button would show on the closed HUD layer. Aaron Bart, if you encounter that, the simple way to try to toggle that is just hit your HUD toggle button, F12, and then press escape. And then that should get them back in sync. But it does depend on the plugin logic. I'll have to think about that a little bit more, but I think that would be an answer, is assume multiple invocations of escape in a short amount of time are a single escape, and it still doesn't solve the problem of if you had a character screen on, and if you hit the HUD screen and you just hit escape, the HUD hasn't changed. But if you're just sitting there and you hit escape, the HUD has hit exchange, and there's just no good way to know whether or not it changed, because we don't have a way to query the state of the HUD. So I think you could play logic games to try to reduce false positives, but I think you're always still going to have a gap in there somewhere. Until such time that we can query, or really until there's an event. Until there's an event that we can request for the HUD is off, the HUD is on. I suspect the people who gave us that action of the HUD toggling thought that that was the answer. And I don't know if... I mean, from a game perspective, you want the system menu to get visible, regardless of the HUD state, if someone wants it. If someone wants the system menu, you want it to show up. So the fact that it does show up is fine. I just wonder where in development that happened compared to, like, was that like a day one thing this happened, and they just didn't take that into account when they were doing the action that you can hook into, or what? But I would love it. I would love an event, a callback that just says, "Yep, HUD's off. Yep, HUD's on," and then we can just stop paying attention to the action key F12 at all, because we don't care about that. We just care about the result, is the HUD on or off. But until such a day, we do what we can. But I'll keep thinking about that, Agartha. Thank you for inspiring that thought. Okay. Oh, Tillerian says, is it safe to say that F12 will toggle the HUD and escape will only turn it on? Problem is an extra escape on a hidden HUD. The problem is that escape might turn it on. The problem is escape will first close any windows that are open. So, character window, escape, close it. Only if the system menu is triggered to open will the HUD flip back to visible if it was hidden. And because we can detect if escape is hit, but we cannot tell if that escape resulted in a HUD flip, we can get out of sync. That's the problem with Tellurian. Not that escape turns on the HUD. That escape maybe just turned on the HUD, and we don't know. If that makes sense. Well, while I wait for anyone else's comment to come in, I'm going to throw some tasks items into storage here, because my goodness. There's a couple of them. Oh, maybe I can just sell them. Nice. I'm not a big fan of selling usable task items, but trophy task items? Oh yeah. My inventory feels uncomfortably full, which is, I expect, a funny experience, given some people's habits of running with full inventories. But I like some breathing space in there. Okay, Telian, I'm not seeing any extra comment from you, and that's totally okay. But if you do want to chat more, feel free to pop into the Cube Plugins Discord server, or just come back next week. That being said, I think that's all we are going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I do hope to see you here again next week, and until then, keep plugging along. Alright, bye-bye now.